California Department of Public Health has awarded a total of $2.3 million to a nonprofit called Gender Spectrum. First, do you realize where the staggering amount of taxes that I pay to California? It's the first or second highest taxed income state in the country. To think that $2,300,000 is going to a deformed idea, a sick, deformed, destructive idea. Gender spectrum. Well, you can't get more direct than gender spectrum, right? That tells you what it is. For activities such as developing, quote, concrete strategies for applying the lens of gender diversity to school practices. Wow. Concrete strategies for applying the lens of gender diversity to school practices. The grant is intended for Gender Spectrum to conduct a rigorous evaluation of whether its own programs work. Among those programs is the development of a 6-page form for students to submit to school districts, their pronouns and whether school staff needs to hide their use of those pronouns from their parents. So do you realize the directness, the boldness of the attempt to tell children your parents are not the authorities in your life, the state is? How is it that half my fellow Americans do not understand how destructive the Democratic Party is? How is it possible? How do people who think that they are good souls support this sort of thing? Well, I know the answer to part 2. I don't know the answer to question 1. The conscience is about as strong as silly putty, or as putty. The conscience is, in most people, a product of their feelings. It does not produce their feelings. It is a product of their feelings. So I've warned all of my life that the route to tyranny begins with the degradation of parental authority. And yet, liberals vote left. Liberals are the tragedy of the country because they don't vote their values. They vote leftist. They are the tragedy. And it comes from weakness and imposed self-ignorance. This is what the director of training for Gender Spectrum says. Carla Pena. That's a shock, a woman. It's not always the case that caregivers are supportive of their child's gender, their gender journey. Yes, that's true. I would not be supportive of my child's gender journey. I admit it. My 10-year-old daughter comes to me and says she's a boy. I tell her that God made her a girl. My 10-year-old boy says he is a girl, and I tell him that God made him a boy. And then I get the hell out of California. Move to almost any country, in fact, either another state or, for that matter, to save my children, another country. No country except Canada is as sick as the United States in this arena. There is no left like the American left. And there is no right like the American right. There's a lot of fight in this country. It's not always the case that caregivers are supportive of their child's gender, their gender journey. I love that term. It's interesting because Sean told me when we first met, I said, have you traveled much? And he said, yes, I've been on a gender journey my whole life. It's a beautiful thing, Sean. And I'm not his parent, so I was supportive.
You didn't tell them, did you?
I didn't tell whom?
My parents?
I did not tell your parents. That's a good point. In that case, if parents are not supportive or if the child is not out, that's not necessarily someone who will be part of the gender support team. In other words, the parent, I assume, will not be part of the gender support team, said Director of Training Carla Pena at the group's annual Gender Spectrum Family Conference last year. I wonder how many men attended that. Naomi Cruz, the group's manager of family and educational programming. That's a shock in a woman. Gave a presentation. The reason I cite it's woman, is that women are overwhelmingly the activists in the movement to ban parental authority and to, in my opinion, hurt children in the gender arena. Gave a presentation at the conference called Intro to Neo-Identities and Neo-Pronouns. What does that mean? What is a neo-identity? The presentation said pronouns may, quote, describe gender as a personal, aesthetic, synesthetic, or headspace-oriented experience. These are the sorts of people that if it weren't for the sick left, they'd be unemployed. What would this woman do for a living? What does it even mean? What does synesthetic mean? They include noun genders like fox gender, moon gender, and rock gender, even emoji self-pronouns such as smiley self. Secularism and boredom produce a lot of bad things, especially when you're given millions of dollars from the Democratic-run government. Cruz said fox self describes someone who identifies with, quote, aspects of a fox, whether that's their appearance, their personality, or how they're viewed in society. Now, I want you to understand that fox identity proves the impossibility of the objective reality of trans. You better know what it is to be the other sex than you do to be another species. Men have not only different chromosomes and body parts and hormones, but brains than women, and vice versa.